Hello, this is a short preparation activity for the following workshop at the Learning and Teaching Conference, June 2017. My name is Austin. I'm going to be just outlining a little bit of literature, a few activities and some thoughts for you to think about in preparation for the workshop and when we meet face to face. So the focus of this session is on excellence and how we report excellence. And I'm drawing primarily on this article that was published by Dawson and Dawson. And what they talk about is how we share our successes but potentially hide failure within learning and teaching research. And now it might be that higher education is very successful, or it might be that recent evidence, as they draw out in this paper, has shown large sets of educational research to show reporting bias. Now, by reporting bias, they mean when authors self-censor their work. So when authors decide only to talk about the successes rather than the failures. And this is slightly distinct from publication bias, where a journal may favour the success stories rather than the failures. But what this does is it changes the body of literature that we can draw upon as educational researchers, as teaching practitioners. And that's particularly important in a climate which focuses on success and impact. Now, as you can see from this slide, quite a lot of activity around this article when it came out. I've heard it talked about at conferences and working groups. It was in the Times Higher, it got a lot of Twitter traffic and a lot of support actually for researchers who publish when innovations don't work. So, an acknowledgement that perhaps we have hidden our failures, but that climate may start to change. And these are the areas that Dawson and Dawson talk about in this article, and I encourage all of you to go ahead and read it, and I'll summarise it here for you but for the purpose of this workshop. They talk about reporting successes because of this drive towards an excellent identity, and we can see how recent discussions around TEF and metrics and awards and recognition may be having an impact here. But they start to question when does routine teaching become innovation, and when do we start to research it? And their suggestion is that perhaps we only start to research our practice when it becomes successful. And then, although the scholarship of learning and teaching encourages publication, and this is a quote from them, publishing one's own failures in the form of evidence of teaching ineffectiveness may clash with that excellence identity. So you can see why in this kind of climate we may not be pushing forward the failures, and we may be simply reporting the successes. They also talk about a skew in learning and teaching funding bodies to request examples, case studies of successes, so good practice and excellent. They cite JISC and the HEA who want case studies of good practice and claim that is skewing the body of evidence that we have to draw upon. Institutional funding for interventions, if you have particularly been employed within an area of the institution to run an intervention and it doesn't work, what are the implications of reporting that? What are the implications for further funding or your job role? And while some methodological approaches do support a kind of warts and all approach to reporting, reflexive methods, action research, where there's iterative cycles of development and piloting, some forms of reflection of our teaching practices or use of evidence may not be so innovative. So, for example, the use of free data, pre-existing data sets, institutional data may be used to support and report on our teaching practice, but actually it may limit the formulation of new research questions or selecting the most appropriate methods to identify an evidence base for our practice, and that could be implicating reporting bias. The final one is another piece of literature, and I've cited this at the end, is around the students as partners literature. Perhaps students feel the pressure to report positives when they are working on projects with academics who may be teaching them, maybe marking their work, and a lot of the literature around co-creation and co-design and bringing students in as partners or students researchers may need to consider some of the implications of doing that in terms of bias. So what I'd like to do in this Learning and Teaching Conference activity is to provide you a number of vignettes, little stories around, most of them taken from the Dawson & Dawson article, so I can't claim credit for those, and some of them bringing in our own experiences from our directorate, which is Student Engagement, Evaluation and Research. So I thought I'd outline these to you now so that you can think about them in preparation for the workshop, and what we'll be asking you to do is discuss them in small groups and think about your reflections and how we can move forward from these positions. I'll also be bringing along these presentation slides in the session, and I'll also provide some on handouts. So the first story about a practitioner who once failed to be excellent, it talks about Academic A. So Academic A teaches human anatomy at a university. As an innovative scholarly teacher, she often trials new teaching approaches and writes them up for journal publication if they are successful. When an innovation fails, Academic A chalks it up to experience and reflects with close colleagues. But she doesn't publish when an approach doesn't work. Sharing would only bring the faculty into disrepute, and she's busy enough with her scientific research. So in relation to this story, and we'll discuss this in small groups, what impact do these publication habits have on the scholarship of learning and teaching and the evidence base that's been created and published and discussed? Okay. The second story, vignette, that I'm going to discuss today is about Academic B, and Academic B teaches sociology at university. Over the past 5 semesters, he's redesigned his assessment several times to incorporate what he's been reading in the literature around assessment, around low-stakes assessment, feedback loops, and all kinds of other new and exciting approaches. Last semester's assessment results were excellent, which prompted Academic B to apply for retrospective research ethics approval to study the work previously produced by his students. And the point of reflection here is, at what point is Academic B engaged in the act of research? So how do we move from everyday teaching practice to innovation to research, and in that continuum, at what point do we start thinking about this in terms of research, in terms of scholarly output, in terms of something that can be disseminated and contribute to a new body of knowledge? Okay, the next vignette. Academic C is an aspiring learning and teaching researcher who's in the middle of leading a small government-funded learning and teaching grant to improve critical thinking. Students love the pedagogical approach he developed, but to his surprise showed no significant difference in critical thinking. Embarrassed the funder may view this as failure, Academic C focuses his publication and reporting efforts on sharing how this programme improves the student experience without mentioning critical thinking. So my question to you, how are unintended outcomes measured and reported? So if you have research objectives, aims and outcomes, suggested outcomes for a project, and there is a suggestion that you might not get there, is it appropriate to start thinking about other impacts, even if they are out of line with what you previously suggested? The next story, Academic D teaches a final year linguistics subject with 1,000 students. She plans to apply for an award for her excellent teaching, and she knows her case will be strengthened if she publishes about her excellent teaching. Academic D is a self-confessed data geek who's kept all the logs from her learning management system site from 2010 to 2015. She runs a dozen different statistical tests and finds if she restricts her analysis to just the data from 2012, there are significant associations. She focuses in on that data, eventually publishing a paper on that year's results. So, the question for reflection, what impact is the reward and recognition of excellence having on reporting bias? So that drive to publish and show evidence of significant associations, clear evidence of excellence, and how do we deal with that in the wider context of our teaching practice? The final vignette for today is around a personal reflection of a project that we worked on in our directorate. So STEER is a central directorate working to address Hallam strategic priorities concerning the student experience. Working alongside a national HEFCE Catalyst funded project team, which was called REACT, the research team designed co-design and peer learning initiatives to make positive difference to the confidence levels of BME students and hope to enhance longer term belonging. The team, including student researchers, approached a range of stakeholders from across the institution, but failed to secure the necessary support for developing these interventions. The project was therefore unsuccessful in meeting the initial project objectives. The research team decided to openly discuss this outcome and the unintended benefits of the process at internal and external events. The team also published articles on the notion of institutional readiness in an honest and transparent way. The questions in relation to this vignette: what are the risks of honest accounts of failure? Maybe failure is too strong a word, maybe we talk around misjudgment, or we play down that language, but when a project doesn't produce the intended outcomes, but actually something else happens, how do we deal with that? What we'll also talk about in the session is some of the methodological reasons for failure, and hopefully we can, as a team and a group, start to think about how we can move and develop our methodology so that we can be thinking about publishing and discussing to a wider audience and impacting that scholarship of learning and teaching literature. So, thank you for listening to this screencast. That's my contact details. You can find me on Twitter, and here are a couple of the references that I've talked about today. I look forward to seeing you all soon.